All right. Today, I'm for the love of sports. I have Rob Narvaez. He's the Vice President of Sports Marketing and Partnerships at Expert Meetings and Events. Played baseball in college as well as some independent league balls along the way, which is a fun story. Also, a very big Mets fan. It's excited about that, and also had stops at Spalding, Under Armour, Authentic Brands, New Era. We'll get into all of those. But Rob, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure, I promise you, is all mine. I've never had the opportunity to work with Raekwon the chef, so I will default to you on that one and hope one day that I can get to those heights and those levels. But Rob, the first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast
Sure.
is, why do you love sports so much?
Ah, man, it's probably always been a part of my makeup. Growing up, I grew up on Long Island, and growing up with my father and cousins, and everyone were huge Met fans, and we kind of have that in common. If you lived in my household, you were a Met fan and an anti-Yankee fan. So to this day, my father calls me twice a day during the summertime. He'll call me when the Mets win, and he'll call me when the Yankees lose. So sometimes I'll get two calls, sometimes I'll get one call, sometimes I won't get a call at all. So to this day, my father still is that huge Met fan, and he gives it to the Yankees every chance he gets.
I love that, man. Exact same thing in my family. Where there's two games that we watch every night. It would be we're watching the Mets because we want them to win, and when they go to commercial, we turn on the Yankees. And it was always so confusing to me when I was younger. It's like, Mom, why would we hate the Yankees? She's like, I know, we're gonna root against them. I was like, well, I don't get this, but okay. And I've done the exact same thing ever since. Once the Mets go to commercial, I click previous or last, whatever the clicker I have at the time says, and watch the Yankees and boo the heck out of them. So we are right there together, man. I promise you that.
That's funny. I have two little girls. When my first daughter was born, we were down in Baltimore. I worked at Under Armour for about 7-8 years, and we were down in Baltimore. Both my daughters were born in Baltimore, and we didn't share a lot of the stories when my wife Elena was giving birth. And one of the first gifts we got were in the hospital, and we had a little knock on the door, and it was a bouquet of flowers, and it said, "Congratulations, love the New York Yankees." Very sweet. And again, the Yankees do things differently. They are just a different organization, and you either love them or hate them, but you got to respect them.
Yes,
And
I
the
respect
second
them.
gift we got, we certainly didn't tell, we certainly didn't tell a lot of people her name, and it was, "Welcome to the world, Alexa." And the card was signed by George and Joan Steinbrenner. So the funny story about that was my father looked at the card again, being that huge Met fan, anti-Yankee fan. He said, "Yeah, I guess this is okay." So nice little, tip of the cap to the Yankees. They just do things a very special way.
Yeah, I think the reason I hate him so much is out of envy and jealousy, if we're being very honest. They always do things better and more correctly, and they're not in the news for all the dumb stuff. They're always in the news for everything that they're doing right. So it is very frustrating to sit here and just watch all the things the Mets do incorrectly and just think, like, why can't just they wrote the playbook. They wrote it. All you have to do is just follow it. It's not that hard, but the Mets are always in their way, and we will, as I see in the background, you have a sweet Pete Alonso jersey, so you're going to be there with me. But again, hopefully, sooner rather than later, they'll sell the team and they'll figure that thing out. I don't know. I don't know if you're allowed to comment on that, so maybe we'll just kind of jump past that.
Yeah.
Say it again.
No, I said that's just funny. We this is the team that we live and die with, right? Good, bad, and different. There are Mets, right? They're not anybody else's Mets. There are Mets.
Exactly. There are Mets, and we did it to ourselves. So yeah, I do want to hop into you playing baseball a little bit. Obviously, that means it's been, with it being in your family for so long, and then eventually making it
Yeah.
to the point of playing, getting into the independent league a little bit, potentially to the minors. I mean, tell me what it was like, coming out of college and not quite getting drafted and still wanting that opportunity to play because so many people want to go out on their own terms, right? So what was it like going and playing a little independent ball for a little while?
It really just it's just that fire within. We talked about sports and growing up with sports, and you have that competitive nature from early on, and that's what I had. Playing little league baseball, playing college baseball, playing a little afterwards. That drive just doesn't go away. So even when I'm working in the business world, I look towards those people with a competitive edge or a competitive fire, and really sports drives that. So it's really, I think it's intrinsic. It's kind of a personal feeling where people just love and live sports, and it kind of elevates them to different things moving on in life. And it certainly did that with me.
And so what how much fun did you have playing independent ball? I've heard both sides of the spectrum. Some people loved every second of it, and some people by the third week they're like, "What the
Yeah.
hell am I doing here?"
Well, it's funny. I have an interesting story. So when I played in St. Louis and played in a little town called Wentzville, Missouri, right outside of St. Louis. And our team, we were the Lake St. Louis Independents. And I lived on a farm with 16 other guys. So we would, in a house, 16 guys. Our team consisted of 24, 25 guys, and some guys were local. But in order to kind of make extra money, we would work the farm. So, we'd wake up 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and we would feed the cows and we would bale the hay and just the things you do on a farm. Um, to this day, I tell a story that I helped deliver a calf when I was, when I was playing baseball, delivered a calf on the farm. So after our chores were done, this was what we would do to make extra money. Come 7, 8 o'clock, we'd start infield. So we had multiple fields on the farm. We had an infield. So we would do our farm work, and then it was baseball all day, every day. And you would, start your baseball day about 8 o'clock in the morning. You'd go till about 1, 2, have a little lunch, hit the cages, and then we would literally get in a van and travel the kind of the Midwest. We're in Illinois and Missouri and just all those little states in the surrounding area, and that's what we would do. And that was our lives for the season. It was pretty interesting, pretty unique.
That is awesome, man. Yeah,
You
you're,
may
you're
find an article written in Sports Illustrated. I don't, again, many many years ago, but we did have a nice little write up in Sports Illustrated. It was pretty cool.
That is hilarious. I mean, just you're never gonna get those days back for better and for worse, but it's just cool to be able to have those memories and kind of just the crazy things you did. I mean, 16 guys in a house right off the bat, that sounds like something else. Now that you
Yeah,
add on top of it that you're, helping a midwife for calves or whatever the correct term is, like that never ever happens in a million years. So I think that it is awesome.
amazing.
And then keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, just an amazing experience. Our coach was a gentleman by the name of Ron Hunt. Ron Hunt was I think a 14 year major league vet. He was rookie of the year, runner up to Pete Rose in 1963. He was the Mets' first second baseman. I should say second. 1963 he started with the Mets. But just a great man, a field general. Probably learning more about the game from him than anybody else. Just an amazing experience between him and his wife, who was our caretaker. She lived on the farm as well. Jackie, just a shout out to Jackie. It was an amazing experience.
I love it. It's just too funny just thinking about, just a bunch of 20-something-year-old guys just working on a farm in the morning, then going to play baseball the rest of the day. It just sounds fantastic. And then so I know you kind of already told me the story on what happened and why you had to leave your baseball career, but if you don't mind telling it for everybody else so we can understand, I guess, the reason why you got into the business side of sports and baseball as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. Anyone who's played a sport and at different levels of sports, everyone has that story. Everyone has that dream of playing in college, and then from college into the professional aspect. And I remember being on a field at second base hit up the middle, rounding third base, tripped on the base, fell forward, and shattered my elbow. And that was the end of my career. And we had talked about it earlier. Back in the day, where modern technology is now in the field of sports, that could have been fixed, and you'd be back on the field in a short amount of time. But you know, I'm not that old, but back in the day, you just didn't have that technology. Little things like that, arm injuries especially. You have a twitch here and a twinge there, and that could be a career. So that certainly happened to me, and a trip on the bag, and in my career,
And it's
everyone's
unfortunate,
got a
man.
story.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just about to say it's unfortunate, but you're a statistic at that point because you talk to anybody that played minor league baseball, they all would have made it if they had the opportunity or if they
So
didn't get hurt or some sort of case like that. But no, of course, I mean, again, it's unfortunate, right? But hey, you're here now. You made it, man. You're on a podcast with me. I mean, how much better could it possibly get?
I think I've arrived.
To say the least. To say the least, man. I love it. And so,
But
so
I love
w-
the story.
with that, like, what with having to with essentially being forced to leave the sport, was there any like lingering effect? Was that a reason why you got into the business aspect of sports, kind of not being able to go out on your own term, or was it always a goal of yours to eventually, once your baseball career was over, to work in some sort of capacity in the world of sports?
And I think it was always a drive. Whether you're in the game or around the game, again, for the love of the game, you want to do something with with in a field that you love, right? Some people say all the time, if you love what you do, you're not really working a day in your life. And that's kind of what I wanted to do after I played, which again was a long time ago. I wanted to stay in and around the game of sports, and just make friends through the process. Playing sports, amateur, collegiate, professional, whatever it may be, you make these relationships. But I think that carries through anything that I've done, is really the relationships that I've had the opportunity to create or be part of. And it just kind of drives you to the next phase of your life, which it happened with me. I had some people that were in and around the game with Major League Baseball and especially Little League Baseball. And I think after that, one of my first jobs was with Little League Baseball. So you're playing, and then ultimately you get the chance to play again. So the people that helped you along the way in your career and in your baseball side, it's time to give back. And I think that's something that I've learned very early in my career, is about giving back. And I think I did that with my first job at Little League Baseball. Really enjoyed it.
And so what are, as I was telling you before, kind of before we hopped on, Little League was just kind of that thing that was always there, right? Like my parents played Little League and, it's just kind of always been there. So you just make sure you're at the field at 6 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you play your game and you go home. Like, what does the business side of Little League look like? And how exactly, what exactly did you do there?
It's funny, coming up around that time, Little League became, a big business, right? When I found out that their marketing department at the time, probably back in the early 2000s, their marketing department was on Madison Avenue. So you think, now everything's been brought in house, but they had a marketing team that was on Madison Avenue, and you realize this is now they're part of the business of sports. Um, they're creating the game itself, but there's so much business around it. And again, that's like anything now in these days, that sports is really the hub, right? It's the connector. It's the connector between the fans and the players and organizations, the organizations and cities. It really is just that facilitator. So, you really have sports at the hub, and everything kind of makes that 360-degree approach, especially now, how big the business of sports has become.
It is, it's very impressive, kind of, especially youth sports. I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, youth sports is $1 billion industry just by itself already. So it's just, the amount of money and time and effort and energy. I mean, you always think about some of those crazy parents, and I'm sure you've talked to a few of them in some capacity, but it's just, it's always very interesting to me to kind of see something as harmless, maybe that's not the best word, as Little League sports, just realizing, wait, their marketing department was on Madison Avenue. Like that's kind of eye-opening, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so with that being, I guess, your first jump and your first leap into the sports world in terms on the business end, what exactly did you learn in those first few years, those first few stops along the way, that you were then able to carry on throughout your career at places again like Under Armour, Authentic Brands, and New Era Caps?
I think it was competition being number one. You always want to strive to be the best at what you do. You do that in the sports world, and then you kind of do that in business. So really using the principles of sport, I think, has really driven me to the positions I've had. I think, starting with Spalding, my goal with Spalding was to bring baseball back to the Major League Diamond. So Spalding was, a 100-year-old brand. They were the official baseball for 100 years, from 1876 to 1976 before Rawlings. Not a lot of people know this, but Spalding was the official Major League Baseball. And then in the 80s, they kind of dropped off the map. So when I came on board in the early 2000s, again, there was so much history in the brand and obviously the sport, but the brand itself being, a 100-year-old company. So my job was to bring it back to the Major League Baseball field. So all those things that you kind of do as a youth, and you drive that competition and you drive that sports and sportsmanship through sport, you kind of do that through business. So again, it was a fun time to really say, hey, let's take this 100-year-old company or this 100-year-old brand. Let's bring it back to where it was, again, being that first baseball company. It was America's first baseball company. So when I started there, it was just fun to talk to people who were in the game in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. And I remember talking to a lot of old Yankees. Bucky Dent was a huge Spalding guy, and it was fun to hear stories about Spalding from him. And you talk to these old guys, I would work on the Major League Baseball field, but I would probably gravitate more towards the coaches because I wanted to understand more about the company that I'm just about to embark in. So this guy would tell me my first cleat was a pair of Spaldings. My first glove was a pair of Spaldings. So It was great to be able to hear the history and the heritage, and then take that brand and bring it into almost into a new era with at the time in the early 2000s was let's bring this back onto the Major League Baseball field. So again, youth sports really driving that determination, that camaraderie, that sportsmanship, all the things that you talk about as a kid in Little League Baseball. I'll tell you, man, that really stuck with me throughout my life, and really for my love of baseball, everything that I've been able to do has been in and around or touch, the sport, which has been, my passion for forever, really.
That's got to be so much fun, man. Just being able to do stuff like that, talk to all those incredible people, those coaches, those athletes, those former athletes, kind of what they're doing. And I'm sure you probably had a boatload of fun just being able to tie the past to the present, what's going on, what was going on, all types of things like that. I'll be honest, I had no idea that Spalding was the, official baseball for 100 years. Like that's
Yeah,
such a story that you can tell and connect that and pull those heartstrings and the
yeah,
nostalgia and all that stuff. So that must have been an absolute blast. And especially with that, you bring that up now. If I'm not mistaken, Spalding just actually became the official basketball of the NBA again, or is taking over for Wilson, if I'm not mistaken, right?
no. So that's their last kind of reach into the sports world. They were holding on to basketball. They became a basketball company. They always were. So in 1983, they became the official NBA basketball up
Oh,
until this year. So they'll be
okay.
ending their contract. Um, Spalding went through kind of some challenging times. They again, 100-year-old company. They were born in Chicopee in Springfield, Massachusetts. They were bought by Russell Corporation years ago, and then Russell was purchased. So Spalding kind of got pushed around a couple of times, and they were focusing more on the cloth side of the business when Russell took over. So the baseball side of the business just kind of after you're building it up, and that was my job for 6-7 years. It just kind of lost its luster. And at that time, the opportunity was all Spalding employees were moving down to Atlanta, Georgia. So that was my opportunity to start looking other places, and that's when Under Armour came knocking on the door, which was a great opportunity, one of the best experiences of my life.
I love it. So I got my information mixed up. Spalding is losing that contract. Sorry, I thought they took it over, but
No
whoops.
problem.
But
Yeah,
hey, it is what it is. They give you an incredible, half decade, if not more. You got to learn so much. You got to connect to a lot of people in the sport that you love
absolutely.
so much too, which I think is just absolutely incredible. And then, as you said, Under Armour came knocking. You clearly did some really great stuff over at Spalding. So, what were the 8 years at Under Armour like, especially when they were just on a massive rise at the time? Now it's a
What?
little, we'll see what happens. But at the time you were there, it must have just been so much fun, just getting to do so much.
Yeah, just to touch on Spalding for a second, it was really my introduction into the business of sports. I think on your shows you talk about mentors a lot, and I've had some really good ones. Probably my number one and number two is a gentleman by the name of Carl Ferraro, who really got me started in the sports world. He took a chance on me when I was coming from Little League baseball, and he taught me the ropes. It's a great thing to have mentors. And I'll tell you, just finishing up Michael Jordan's series, the Last Dance. You look at the people where people play at such a high level, or they're in the business world at such a high level. There are people behind that to get them to where they are. And between Carl Ferraro being one, probably my number one mentor, Ray Negron, who is another one of my mentors. Ray Negron is still working for the New York Yankees. He's been with the Yankee organization for over 30 years. But those are really two people that have always been in my corner, always believed in me, but really got me started in this business.
That is awesome, man. And you're
So,
totally right.
yeah, yeah. God, I'm
I was
sorry.
gonna, yeah, I was gonna say you're totally right. I mean, we do talk about mentors a lot, and they do always come up, and really just the relationships and the networking and understanding. I mean, what was it? Coming from minor, independent ball, going to little league baseball, and then what was it that you did to set yourself apart? That one of these gentlemen would say, you know what, hey, let's bring on Rob. He knows what he's doing. I think this will be a smart opportunity on our part.
Yeah, it's something this is something I've always kept with me, and it was one of my coaches that said to me, play like you never know who's watching. That's kind of the point. You never know who's watching. So bust your butt in everything that you do, whether it be on the field, whether it be off the field. Um, Always play and always work like someone else is watching. So just always do your job, do what you're supposed to do, but something even more so, just go above and beyond. go that extra mile, do that extra sprint, do that extra hour on a report or something like that. Just, you know, I think everything that I do always has a sports analogy. It's inherited in my body. My jokes are sports. My analogies are sports. So it really is, play like somebody's watching. You never know who's watching you. So just play like someone else is watching you.
I
And it's
like
the same
it.
thing in the business world. Just do what you're supposed to do and just do that extra mile.
That's all it
Sports
takes
always gives
sometimes.
you that innate ability to, to strive or drive to be better in everything you do. And I've kind of always hold that near and dear to my heart.
That's a great way to go about it, right? Just doing a little bit more than what's asked of you because you want to, though, right? It's not like it was, I'm sure at times it would have been
Right.
nice to go home a little earlier or go hang out with your friends on the weekend. But at the same time, understanding it's like, well, you're going to be doing this career for the rest of your life. You can hang out with your friends whenever you want at that point. So I think that that's really cool. And looking at that. And again, it's so important for people to understand that, especially in an industry like sports where the supply and the demand are so high, you're going to have to do a lot to set yourself apart. You're going to have to be somebody that shows everyone around you, whether they're watching or not. One of those times they will be watching you and
Yeah.
you don't know which time it's going to be, right? So make sure all the time you're working harder because that will resonate and a lot of other people will see
Absolutely.
that 100%.
Yeah.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Well,
Agreed.
good for you, man.
Yeah.
Good for you. Absolutely killing
Cool.
it. So after Spalding, as you said, you went to Under Armour. So you spent almost an entire decade at
Yeah.
Under Armour. So good for you there, man. And as I was
Yeah.
saying before, it was kind
Yeah.
of when Under Armour was just totally like Nike. I don't know if they were ever scared. I worked at Nike. They told us never to worry about Under Armour, but I'm not sure. I think they got scared for a hot second there. And then so what was it like working at Under Armour during this time where everything was just going nuts and there was just so much happening in that space?
Yeah. It was an unbelievable time. I started there in 2008, and I was employee number 614, which sounds like a lot, but there are upwards of 15,000 employees, I think, something crazy like that. So it was kind of almost like flying by the seat of your pants. Everything was new. We were challenged every year to grow 30%, and it happened. And so it was like, what's next? How do you do this? How do you grow this much? And it was almost like being in college, because a lot of the people that were there were young, coming out of college, a lot of former athletes, a lot of people that had that A-type personality, that go-go personality. So a lot of like-minded people. The goal for the company was really, the marching orders from the CEO at the time was Kevin Plank, and he really got everyone rallied to march to that same beat, right? Follow that same path. And it was just a super, super exciting time, starting in 2008. But it was a crazy time. It was everything incorporated. It was an amazing time.
And what were some of, like, I guess more specifically, what were some of the projects that you were working on that, I mean, over an 8-year period, you're able to really kind of
Mhm.
put your handprint and your fingerprints on and, grow from, as you said, employee number
Sure.
614 to 15,000.
Yeah. When I started there, I took over the most mature business, which was base layer. So that was really the introduction of Under Armour into the market. It really started with a tight T-shirt.
I
It was it. It was one T-shirt. This company was born from Kevin Plank, and it was born out of an idea of creating a T-shirt, something that'll make you better, something that'll wick sweat away from you. Just this one, kind of silhouetted idea became this massive company. So started there, working on the performance based layer side. And then again, for my love of sports, as the years go on, you're wearing a lot of different hats. So you're probably wearing 10 different hats at one time. And then my love of team sports got me into that business as well. So then I started from the base layer side and then worked team sports. And I did everything from building, products for baseball, lacrosse, ice hockey, softball, all different team sports, and to the retail side. So you would see the products that I created with other, cross-functional team members in Dick's Sporting Goods, or at the time Sports Authority, or Models, or things like that. And again, so that was early on, and then you start getting into other sides of the business. You get into the collegiate side of the business, and then you're building products for colleges and universities. You're building product for pro teams. So from building product, then you get onto the marketing side of the business, and you're really ultimately telling stories. First of all, you're telling the Under Armour story, right? All things make you better. All these products are making you better, and then you're creating brand partnerships. So you're telling brand stories between, the University of Notre Dame and Under Armour, and these two brands coming together to become one. So at the heart of it, it's really about storytelling, but also making some badass product to back up those stories and those claims.
I will be 100% honest with you. I completely forgot about the actual Under Armour, that shirt. Like, I mean, that's why we all got it, whatever it was when I was playing Little League. We'll go back there. It's just crazy that like
Yeah,
now this entire I completely forgot that was like the whole thing it was based on. That's the You did a great
it's
job
on
at
one
telling the
T-shirt.
rest of the story, man. So good for you. Congrats.
I'll tell you, when I first started, it was kind of a crash course because their sole focus was on making athletes better. So in order to make an athlete better, you need to understand what goes on inside the body, the prior perceptive motions, and what makes an athlete run faster or jump higher, or things like that. So you're really going back to school and understanding what makes the body work, and then ultimately building products to enhance that performance, to enhance a runner's motion, to enhance a pitcher's motion. Some of the products you come up with, you fail. You probably fail more times than you succeed, which is a good thing. um, so there's a lot of products that I've created, or had the ability to have a hand in creating, that didn't make it off the chopping room floor. Making products for pitchers, making products for football players. Padded protective products. It was an exciting time, and just so happy to be a part of it. Made lifelong friendships and relationships along the way, and again, just carried me through my career.
And how cool is it that a company as big as Under Armour, and again, this is a little while ago, so they were kind of on the come up, on the rise. How cool is it that they would? It sounds like they kind of encouraged you not to fail, of course, but they encourage you to create product and try new ideas and try new things. Like, how empowering was that in that aspect of the business? But then also, in just the marketing aspect and the team aspect and the collegiate aspect in whatever you tried to do
Sure.
while you were at the company.
Oh, absolutely. They encourage you to fail, because if you're not failing, you're not trying, and you're not thinking outside the box, right? You never want to be too safe. We would say that the athlete has a table at everything that we did. So that's one of the reasons why Under Armour and a lot of these sport companies do have athletes. Not just athletes, but they have a very large number of former athletes as part of their staff. Our job is to understand the athlete, understand what he goes through and what she goes through, and ultimately create these products. But however, at the same time, you're looking towards these athletes for feedback. You're going into the baseball fields and spring trainings, and the NFL combine, and places like that, to really get these top tier athletes and say, here, try this. I made this for this reason. Tell me what you think. You may get a response back and say, this is the worst thing that I've ever seen. Well, that's a failure. Let me go back to the drawing board. But it's a case study a lot of times, and you've got to find good people to work with, and find good organizations to work with. And it really was that camaraderie and bringing people together for that common good. And that was ultimately Under Armour's marching orders was to make athletes better. And you do that by using their understanding, and their expertise, really.
And so we got to ask, what are some of the products you did hit on?
Some of the products that we did hit on. So a lot of it was, fashion driven, but you're really trying to create authenticity in the things that you do. So there was football product, padded protective product, and it became, from a football standpoint, it went into other sports. There were products where you're using proprietary information and components to create padded protective pieces that you could literally take a hammer and hit this thing, and then kind of the impact would disperse through this material, which is just, I mean, the stories I could go on and on about all the different materials that we used, and the partners overseas and domestically, where you're coming together, and the technology can maybe not just be in a pad, but it can be as fine as a thread. So it's just, the technology impact was huge. And then you're testing again. You talk about testing on professional athletes. You and I touched upon this one story. I had a letter come across my desk one year, and it was from a mother. Said She says, I forgot how she got my information, but the letter came to her. She says, "Hi, my name is Jessica, and I have an 8-year-old son, and his favorite thing to do is to play baseball. Unfortunately, he's going through cancer treatments, and he has a port in his chest, and that's where he gets his medication from. And she says, does Under Armour have any type of product that would help him to be able to play the sport? The problem was the port couldn't take any impact, so she was looking for a particular product. I called her immediately and I said, listen, why don't we let's kind of make this a day. So Jessica and her son Dylan and the father came into, they were from Virginia, and they came into the office. And it was just a special day for him and his mother, but probably more so for me. Dylan has become my buddy since then. And that particular day, we took him on a tour of the campus. He went to, the design lab and worked with designers. He went to the footwear lab and he worked with the people making professional footwear for, Cam Newton and people like that. But ultimately, what I wanted to do was to get him into our studios and create something for him. So ultimately, with this padded protective product we were just talking about, we created a specific shirt for Dylan, and we put it on him, and we actually traced, to put my hand over where the port was, and we traced a spot to protect that port. Ultimately, what we did is we made a padded protective shirt specifically for Dylan that had pads in certain areas, but had a specific pad over that port. We got a couple of samples in. We fit him like he was a professional athlete. We did measurements, and we got the shirts in, and his doctor signed off on it. He was 8 years old at the time. And the doctor said, yeah, you're good to go. He can play baseball with this. And Dylan, to this day, he's a healthy, I believe he's probably about 13 years old now, 12, 13 years old now, if not older. And I've stayed in touch with him and his mother ever since this. I think this was in 2003. So yeah, he's healthy, and it's just little things like that with this organization helped to allow this kid to play baseball.
I love it, man. I think that's
So fun
incredible.
project.
Yeah, I mean, just the opportunity,
Yeah.
I'm sure you could have read that letter and been like, wow, here's a shirt or here's a sweatshirt. Sorry, we can't do anything. But as you said, play like no one's watching. So you took it way above and beyond. You turned it into something, and now you have a lifelong friend in this entire family. You have friends in this entire family, and you literally changed this kid's life. Like, I mean, just having that opportunity, but a lot of people have that opportunity. They probably don't see it. You actually took advantage of it. You executed upon it, which I think is incredible and just speaks to, you being a good person, right? Like, you took time out of your day and did what you could to help this little kid, this 8-year-old kid, just trying to play baseball, the sport you loved growing up so much, and the sport you played. You knew what it was like when it was taken away from you, right? So you want to make sure that it doesn't happen to him either. And I think that's incredible, man. And I do love that story. It definitely, tingles some tears. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. And again, I think it's those mentors that you have. Again, I talked about Ray Negron, and he's probably taught me more about humility and giving back than any other person outside of my mother and father. But to this day, I mean, I know he's out right now, and he's serving people that are less fortunate, and he's been wearing a mask every day for the last 3 weeks and delivering food in the Bronx and in Queens and Long Island. That's just something that I've learned from him.
I love it. Surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
And, hopefully I can surround myself with you a little more often when the world gets back to normal. Maybe I'll grab you that beer when we get back into the city one of these days. And so you worked at Under Armour for almost a decade as well. So Spalding and Under Armour, already two gigantic brands that you got to spend a very big chunk of your career at, learn a lot, network a lot. As you work with teams, you work with players, you worked with overseas partners, as you said, and then where was the opportunity to move after Under Armour? So this is the 2016-ish timeframe, if I'm not mistaken. What was the deciding factor into moving to Authentic Brands?
I tell you, one thing I do have is a lot of stories. So in 2015, unfortunately, we had an episode in our house where someone had broken into our house while we were home.
Oh.
Which now it makes for a good dinner story, but at the time it was pretty traumatic. So I remember my wife telling me, it's, we've been in Baltimore and we loved every minute of it, but it's time to go home. So at that time, started looking to go back to New York, and again, staying in that sports industry. And I had a couple of opportunities in different states, and we weren't from Baltimore. Obviously, we're from New York, and it was just, what's our next step, right? At that point, my wife and I, we had 2 little girls. Who are just the best. So it's like, what do? I have opportunities in different states. Do we go to Florida? Do we go to Boston? Do we go out west? And ultimately, we made the decision to come back to New York. So it was, okay, what's the next step on the sports side? I had an opportunity with Authentic Brands Group. Authentic Brands Group is a brand ownership company and a global marketing company as well. And what they do is they own and operate at this stage. They probably operate about 50 different brands. Everything from dead celebrities, which they say they own the estates of Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Shaquille O'Neal. They have some fashion brands, and they also had sport brands. So the sport brands that they had at the time were Prince and Spider, the skiwear company, Tree Torn, the old 125-year-old Swedish footwear brand. So it gave me the opportunity to again be in sports, and I worked under the Prince and the Spider brand. So coming back to New York was really the goal. That's where my family wanted to be, and we worked with some really really smart, intelligent people. Really the artists of the deals. And I know Jamie Salter, who's the CEO of the company, Nick Woodhouse, who's the CMO of the company and board member. Just some really, really great people. John Erlinson is another one that comes to mind. Understanding and crafting deals. They were deal makers. So I was there for a short period of time, probably over 2 years. But I learned probably more about running and operating a business from A to Z there than pretty much anywhere in my stop. So really understanding business and how to run a business from these guys, which was huge.
And so while you're at these other stops, obviously you were doing a lot of different things at Under Armour and Spalding, but what is it now like essentially being a part of two different brands? I mean, again, Prince, I'll be honest, I don't know too much about Prince, but I have heard of Spider and I understand what they're about. Again, I have to assume Prince is also not in the snowboard ski apparel space. So what was it like kind of being in these two different worlds essentially at all times and needing to different strategies and different tactics and different ways of going about things? Was that even more
Yeah.
enjoyable for you, or was that just starting to wear down after a little while? Because that's so much on your plate.
Yeah, there was a lot. And you talked about with Under Armour, you're wearing 10 different hats. With this company, you're probably wearing, 20 different hats because you're a global company. You're working with partners all over the world. You're working on licensing agreements. So you've got the legal side of the business. You're understanding what works in the United States doesn't necessarily work in Japan or China or Europe or Latin America. So understanding the world and what goes into different products and different brands in different parts of the world. Understanding deals, working with licensing agreements to have the opportunity for organizations to sell your products or create your products in different parts of the world. So again, I think what made me good at the job really was again about creating partnerships. Um, a lot of the partners that I've had since my Spalding days. A dear friend of mine, he's Korean, and we've worked together since 2001. And any chance we have the opportunity to work together on a product or a brand all over the world, we still do. This gentleman, again, one of my dearest friends, when my wife and I got married in, oh no, I'm forgetting the year, 2007, I think. This gentleman
Uh,
flew from Korea. No, I think I nailed it.
I'm
2007.
sorry, Rob. We're live though.
He
That's
flew
the
from
only
Korea.
problem. Ooh.
2007, December 7th, 2007 is when we got married. He flew from Korea on a Friday, came to our wedding on a Saturday, left on a Sunday to go back home. So it's just about creating partnerships. And you said it earlier, it's about being around good people. And you want to surround yourself with good people that make you better. And I think that's at the heart of what I do is creating long lasting partnerships. And I've been able to do that and carry these partnerships with every brand and an organization that I've worked with and for.
I love it, man. I think that part's very important. And again, surrounding yourself with those people, learning a lot. It seems like at each stop along the way, you've also been able to develop, maybe not develop an entire new skill set, but you've been able to learn a lot more and pick up more things along the way and, how to juggle. And as you said, especially with Authentic Brands Group, really how to run the business, not really just worry about the product or how to create the product. You did a lot of that at Under Armour, but you're able to really learn how to run
Yeah.
a business with Authentic Brands Group, which I think is really, really cool. And after there at Authentic Brand Groups for a couple of years, you end up going to New Era Cap. And I apologize before I said caps. And if I'm not mistaken, it's a very hard and fast no S, as our good friend Alex told me. But so what was it like, then moving on to New Era Cap for a year and really rather, again, with Prince and Spider, yes, you're in the sports space a little bit, but New Era, I mean, that is when you think of sports, when you think of
Yeah.
baseball caps, like that's easily one of the first brands that comes to mind. How cool is it to go back into like the very super in-depth, super authentic side of the sports industry again?
Yeah, I think you hit on it. When you say authenticity, authenticity is a big deal. I think having the opportunity to get back into the sports that I love, baseball being one of them, was just an opportunity that I looked forward to jumping on board with. Newer again using their rich history and heritage, and they this year they just celebrated 100 years of being in business. 4 generations of Cook men, have really created this company from back in the day where businessmen wear hats, to ultimately being the authentic side of the business, the authentic side of sports, the authentic cap of Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA. I guess I'm always been a storyteller and a person who looks to lean on tradition a little bit and then bring things into kind of a new forefront. So having the opportunity to do that with New Era was awesome. Working directly with Major League Baseball, which is I hold near and dear to my heart. Again, growing up as that kid that always wanted to bat third and play short for the New York Mets. I've always hold that near and dear to my heart. But with Major League Baseball, that was the ultimate goal. I've always wanted to work for Major League Baseball. When one was be a player, and then ultimately, be part of this machine that drives the best game in the world. So, again, to work with New Era and have the opportunity to work directly with them was awesome. And again, it's creating those partnerships. I've been able to form great partnerships, with the teams at Major League Baseball, and look to continue to do so.
I think it's great, man. Again, just the super
Yeah,
authentic. It's like literally when you think of baseball, you need a bat, a glove. Probably you're going to need a hat and a ball. I mean, that's it's one of like the prerequisites of the game. I think is just fantastic. How many kids forgot their caps at home and their parents had to turn around and go get them again, right? There's just so much of that goes into it, and I just think it's so darn cool that you did have this opportunity. And so again, we went over a lot of it. We're going to go over what you're doing now a little bit, but just along the way. I mean, working with athletes and
yeah,
entertainers, as I said before, Raekwon of the Wu Tang Clan, Andre 3000, Mookie Betts, Cam Newton, learning marketing on that global scale. And I say learning because marketing is one of those games that it's continuously changing. So you always have to stay up to date with what's going on. I mean, what,
yeah.
like, over your career, what was it like? Kind of always, as you said, always work like someone's, always play, always work like someone's watching. What was it like always needing to be up to date on everything and always having the opportunity to say, okay, social media is a thing now. Like, how do we take advantage of this at Under Armour? What do we do at New Era? So what was that like essentially, like kind of, you can go to a degree, get a degree in marketing at school, and 4 years later, most of that stuff's useless anyway. So how did you take that part
Right.
of your career, and how did you take advantage of always getting to reinvent
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah, I think always having that passion for what you do. Again, there may be accountants that are so passionate about accounting, they feel like they don't work a day in their lives. I'm a sports nut. I've always been that the fan of the game, fan of the athlete, fan of organizations and things like that. So, to have that love, I think works for you. Now, something that I've always told, and this is probably the first thing if I interview someone, is once you become a person who's working in the business of sports, you can't be a fan. That's the first thing you have to lose. So working with athletes and working with organizations, it's a job. It could be a fun job. It could be exciting. It could be a lot of things that you look forward to doing, but you can't be a fan. You can't lose sight of what you're there to do. Whether it be this past year or in 2019, we shot with Nua an amazing commercial. Right, we actually rented out 2 subway cars in New York City, and we shot overnight. So from 5 o'clock in the evening to 5 o'clock in the morning, we shot a commercial with 9, 10, 11 different athletes. Everyone's from, again, we talk about partnership. These guys have become, friends and great partners. So Francisco Lindor, Ronald Acuna, Justin Turner, Didi Gregorius, the list just goes on and on. Um, and it was an amazing opportunity. And there was a lot of people that worked there, but you got to take that fan out. You're there for a reason. You're there for a purpose. You got a job to do. At the same time, these are some of these are your childhood heroes. As young as you may be, but you can't be that fan. You really have to focus the task at hand and do your job.
And I think,
So
you
it's
kind of
pretty exciting.
you stole my next question, but I do agree. It's like, having to
Yeah,
take yourself out of that and now really not only not being able to be a fan. I mean, again, we've been talking about the Mets this whole time. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you still watch a lot of SMY and you pay attention to the Mets when they're on. But, what is it
absolutely.
like not like, as you said, like not being able to kind of, I'm sure you can appreciate these guys when you see them. It's like, hey, Francisco Lindor, I think you're incredible at what you do. Really appreciate it. But not going over the top and, making them feel welcome, I guess, is pretty important. But what about like rooting interests, I guess, right? Like now your Francisco Lindor jersey is right next to your Pete Alonso jersey, right? So like how does that kind of start to play into it where you're really meeting these guys and learning who they are as players and kind of growing an affinity, as you
Yeah.
said, a partnership, a friendship from there?
Yeah, and I think that, kind of that thought of not becoming a fan is really more so geared towards, you know, um, guys and girls coming into the industry. If you're coming out of college and your first job is with, a league or a team or an organization that works with athletes, I think that's where that comment is. And I always use that if I'm interviewing somebody or bringing somebody on board. It's, what, you got to take that fan out. But as you go along, in your career, you mature, you grow up. You talked about it earlier. Some of these stops, you've learned more. When you leave an organization and go to another organization, you learn. And once you stop learning, it's a bad situation. So another thing I tell people, I tell my girls all the time, I said, if you learn one new thing every day, it makes you a smarter person. So whether it's in school, whether it's on the job, whether it's on the field, you really got to strive to continue to learn, to educate yourself, and just make yourself better at every stop of the way. So I think it really was for those guys and girls just starting out in the industry. But again, it's about partnerships. It's about authenticity. It's about trust. I think is a big word to use with athletes. Always wanting to have their best interest in heart, but also the interest of the organization you're working for, supporting, or representing. So again, it's that trust factor, it's camaraderie, and it really is partnerships. It's creating partnerships that are long lasting. What I love to do is if I'm creating a partnership today, I want to have it tomorrow. I want to have it the next day. I'm not in this for get in and get out. That's not my mentality. It's not the way I work or operate. It's about long term partnerships, really.
Absolutely. I mean, that a long-term friendship or
Yeah,
long-term relationship is going to bring back much, much more for both sides than just a short-term, quick,
absolutely.
hey, how's it going? Right. So I
Right,
think it's important to see
right.
how you can bring value to others over that long term, and as well as, hope that eventually they do, hold up their end of the bargain and, rising tide lifts all boats type of situation. I think that's really important. And, you bring up these athletes, we talk about them some more. It's always funny, we talk about like influencer marketing when athletes, again, watching The Last Dance, athletes were the original influencer, right? Seeing what Michael Jordan did for the
Sure.
NBA and for all these brands, McDonald's and Gatorade and kind of the Nike brand and what they were able to turn that relationship into. How have you kind of looked at athletes in that lens, especially at your time in these, very sports heavy places, Spalding, Under Armour, New Era? How are you able to take advantage of this athlete as an influencer, especially with the rise of social
Mhm.
media while you're at Under Armour and then pretty much with it being, next to commonplace, especially at places when you're at New Era?
I think it goes back to authenticity. You look, if you're marketing with athletes, you can have an athlete in a car, or you can have an athlete selling flowers, or really anything, any type of business or pitchman. But to me, it's got to be authentic. It's got to be a reason for being. You use an athlete for a particular reason. Thinking about recent, marketing trends where, I had the opportunity to build a program around Mother's Day last year. And some of the athletes, again, this is relationships that you have, and you find, Didi Gregorius is a great example. He's got this wonderful, wonderful relationship with his mother. His mother was a championship softball player in Curacao. And he learned a lot of his baseball skills from his mother. So one thing we did last year was an opportunity to showcase him and his mother during Mother's Day, work with Major League Baseball, work with New Era to create, a specific Mother's Day cap. But it really is a 360-degree approach. You take that athlete, you have an authentic reason for being. You talk about Mother's Day, you bring his mother involved, you create a product around Mother's Day. So again, it's really about authenticity and being authentic to one, the athlete, and really to the consumer. And you're not just selling a product, you're sharing a story, and that's what makes for good marketing. That's what makes for good social marketing. And ultimately, if you're selling a product, there's a reason for selling it. You're not just throwing another product into the mix. So authenticity and being authentic to everyone involved, including the consumer. I think that's where it's at.
I love it, man. I think you've done so much cool stuff. And the before we move on to what you're doing now with expert meetings and events, I brought it up a couple times, just kind of teasing it, but you didn't take the bait. So now I'm just going to go out and say it. What were you doing with the Wu-Tang Clan, and how did you get Raekwon on some of this stuff? What I gotta know, man. I gotta know.
It goes back to friendships and partnerships. I have a dear friend. His name is Christian Pascal. He's been in the music business and restaurant business for many, many years. As a matter of fact, if we talk about my wedding on December 7th, 2007.
Yes,
Boom.
we got it. All right, we're good. I got it more than I think you do at this point.
He was actually in my wedding, so I've been friends with this great guy for many, many years. Him being in the music industry, he's always the guy who's like, I'm the sport guy, he's the music guy. If I have something in sports that I think would work with him, I always push people to him, and same way with him. And one day he says, listen, you got to meet my boy. You got to meet Raekwon. He loves New Era. He wants to come up and see you. And ultimately, we first met at the Hunt and Fish Club, wonderful restaurant in Midtown, and that's where we should go and have that beer. And we met Raekwon, who just could not be a nicer guy. But again, he was a fan of a product. He's a New Era guy, right? And that's part of his being. So ultimately, I got him. He also has residence in Toronto. He just opened up a shop called Purple 6. Oh, I'm going to butcher this. Purple 612, which is really kind of an authentic shop to him. He's got, clothing. He's got Supreme and New Era and brands like that. He's got a barbershop within the shop. So he came up to Buffalo at the time, is where New Era is. And we become friends. And, ultimately, again, you create those partnerships, which turn into friendships. And they'll last for as long as you can, be good to it, right? But a real good guy. I got a ball there that says, love you, bro. It's one of my favorite balls. It says, love you, bro. Raekwon, the chef.
Dude, that is awesome. There's a barbershop in there. Does he have a restaurant in his shop as well? I mean, he has to, right?
No restaurant. It's got to be the coolest shop I've seen in a very long time. So you can shop there. You can buy, I don't know, a $500 Supreme sweatshirt, but you can also get a nice fade at the same time. So it's just a very unique business, but it's very true to him. Very true to him and his guys. So it's good stuff.
I love it, man.
Check it out. Now I get it.
Next time I'm in Toronto, I will make sure to go and I'll ask for Raekwon. Rob sent me, and hopefully he's okay with that. I hope. I had
it. Purple 611. That's what it's in Toronto. It's near the arena. Check it out. It's pretty fantastic.
I love it, man. That's good stuff. And awesome. Well, thank you for all that. And so now let's talk about what you're doing a little bit now. It seems like it's kind of I'm really curious because it doesn't seem like really anything else that you've done up to this point, which is interesting. Yeah. So you're now with Expert Meetings and Events. You're the Vice President of Sports Marketing and Partnerships. Meetings and events, two things that we're not allowed to have right now in this weird world we live in. So I guess say the world's spinning on its axis and everything's the way it's supposed to be. What exactly do you do at this company, and how have you been able to incorporate sports into it?
Well, I'll give you a little history on the company. So there was a wonderful woman who I married on December 7th, 2007. My wife created Expert Meetings and Events. And the good thing about that, she left, she's been in the hotel industry for many, many years. Was super good at her jobs every step along the way. She worked at the Ritz-Carlton for many years, boutique hotel companies. And in around 2000, and I would say 2000 and, trying to think how long the company's been in business for about 6, 7, 8 years. Years ago, she came to me and says, listen, would you support my decision if I left this job to start this company? And I said, listen, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be you. My wife is a sweetheart, but she's a bulldog. And I said, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be you. So she started this company, and I've been able to assist in a very small way. When I was with Under Armour, I would make an introduction. So what she's been able to do is to create, again, long-standing partnerships of booking events for different brands. So she books events for everything from Under Armour, New Era, Steph Curry, and the Department of Defense, which is great. You can see how she runs the gamut in the types of clients that she has. So I've been able to do little things when I've worked at Under Armour, when I worked at Authentic Brands Group, when I worked at New Era and places like that. So now I've taken more of an approach where diving headfirst into this, sort of creating a sports centric side of the business. Coming from these different brands and thinking about all these events that I've been a part of, whether creating the event, being part of the event, Major League Baseball All-Star Game, the Super Bowl, NFL Experience, the NFL Combine, just different things that I've been a part of, and knowing that different brands and partners go to these events. Well, how do you get there? Well, you've got to fly. You need hotel reservations. You need meeting space and planning space and things like that. So, just taking a page from her book, again, learning about the industry from her, which I've done along the way, really trying to create a sports centric side of the business, to create these events for brands that she's been doing for many years, and just kind of increasing the reach on the sports side. So it's been pretty cool. So I've been able to do it, as a side job for many years, but now jumping into it, head first. It's pretty exciting. Pretty exciting.
That is awesome. You guys are just a husband wife team that are absolutely killing it. I think it's such a cool thing. And I guess so because it's been around for a little while, as you said, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever that number is, and you kind of have been assisting for a little while. I guess why was when you started, I apologize, I did not write that date down, but why? What made you say, okay, you know what, I'm kind of done with the corporate life. New Era was great, and Raekwon is a great friend. I don't need anything else from this. I got everything I wanted. So what was it to? Why did you make the leap to say, you know what, I'm gonna come on full time and we're gonna crush it together?
I tell you, you know what? Being home, it's interesting. Being home for the last couple of months, you kind of check your priorities. And when I was working at New Era, I was actually commuting to Buffalo. So I was getting on a plane on a Tuesday morning, flying up to Buffalo Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then flying home on a Thursday night. Um, and that was without travel. With this brand, there's a lot of travel to different cities and states and things like that. But being home, you realize, I've got, again, two little girls that are 9 and 10 years old. You prioritize things in your life, and you know what's important to you. And just missing that time with my girls, it's like I can't do this anymore. I can't. I don't know if I was doing it because I was being a little selfish because I love the organization, I love the partners that we had and relationships we created. But I just couldn't do it. So during this whole pandemic and being here with my girls and being their teacher. Now I'm homeschooling, 5 days a week, and I'm not an easy teacher, but we're having fun with it. You prioritize things in your life. So the ability to be able to be home a lot more, to assist in the creation of this organization that's 8 years in, it's been pretty fantastic. So I'm not closing the door to other opportunities, but at this stage of my career, we're just really expanding and growing and doing super well. And again, I'm the worker. My wife is the brains of the operation. So anyway, any way I can assist and bring business to our organization has been fantastic.
I love it, man. I think that's so cool, especially as you said, we have all checked our priorities the last couple months, and we've all kind of, if you haven't already, leaned into what you want to do for the rest of your life, or at least for the time being. And for me, that's getting to talk to cool people like you through this microphone with a red light on. So I've been thoroughly enjoying that. And I guess for these last couple months, as I said before, expert meetings and events, like those are two things we're not really allowed to do anymore unless they're virtual in some capacity. So how have you guys been able to pivot? And I guess if you don't mind, we'll stick to the sports space a little bit. I'm sure your wife's as incredible as you make her out to be. I'm sure she's come up with some really cool ideas. But what have you been doing on the sports side to try and keep everything tied in and keep that, revenue at least coming in, considering now it's both of you work at this company, so we really, really need it to do well.
Yeah. You have to evolve like any business, right? If you don't evolve, you're going to die. That's kind of a thought that I've always heard. So from her perspective, again, I always go back to those partnerships, those long-term partnerships, doing well by your clients and your customers. What's going on for her current clients and customers is the good thing is no one's canceling a lot. Things will open up, so you see a lot of postponements. You see, any events or meetings that were booked for June and July are now pushing out to September, October. So again, it really, really starts with those relationships, to create those relationships and those partnerships, to know that you're doing your best for your client's doing their best for you, and working through this thing together. Ultimately on the sports side, we will open up. Things will open up. It's going to be different. I don't think it'll ever be the same. And that may not necessarily be a bad thing. We're learning every day. We're learning what we don't need and what we do need and how to make ourselves better. On the sports side, again, things will open up. People are going to travel. People are going to see games. When that is, it kind of remains to be seen. Um, but it will open up, right? So you need to evolve. You need to pivot. You need to work with organizations to say you are gonna have, you have all these meetings and plans planned out for June, July. Let's work with you to figure out what does it look like. What does the landscape look like in September, October, November? What about 2021? So it's really about offering solutions to problems that organizations are going to have that are in the midst of it, and just creating solutions to those problems and being a strong partner.
I love it, man. Rob, this has been absolutely fantastic. Sincerely appreciate your stories, your insight. I'm sure we could go on for another 2 hours just about what you did at Under Armour by itself. But this has been incredible. Rob Narvaez, VP of Sports Marketing and Partnerships at Expert Meetings and Events. Huge Mets fan, all around great guy. Rob, appreciate your time today, man.
Michael, thanks so much. I've been watching your podcast over the last month or so, and you do a great job. And it's nice to listen to stories. Again, being a storyteller yourself, it's nice to hear people in the industry hearing their stories. It just makes us better.
That's what
Great
I'm
job.
shooting for. That's what I'm shooting for. I sincerely appreciate it. And now you can add your name to the illustrious list of the guests that I've had. But no,
All
sincerely appreciate it, Rob. Thank you.
right, Michael, take care.